Frank, I love how your icebreakers, how your board, your top 50 free agents board is just always in motion. Somebody
Has to
comes
be
off the list and now we've got more. And that's why you got to keep tabs on it at Daily
a
Faceoff. We're always getting
living,
this thing updated.
breathing list.
That's right. So, first one I got for you, we're only 2 weeks away from NHL free agency. That starts Saturday, July 1st. We will have a 2-hour special here at Daily Faceoff. That means you got a new top 50 ranking out today, and you've got a new number one. Come on down. Who is it, Frank?
It is Dmitry Orlov of the Boston Bruins, as mentioned, working with AFP Analytics on some contract projections. And he's now projected to have the highest AAV of any free agent that's still on the board. Probably not really a shock given how thin this defensive crop is in this free agent class. There's some thought lingering out there among agents and teams that Orlov could be approaching upwards of $8 million a year in an AAV. I think that's pretty high, but I also think this projection from AFP at 5 years times 625 is low. We saw Damon Severson, whose numbers were a bit south of that, end up at 8 years times 6.25. And Severson, yes, of course, he's a little bit younger, but Orlov has showed in his brief time in Boston some offensive flair that he really didn't have when he was with the Washington Capitals, at least this season. He scored almost as many points in 23 games with the Bruins as he did in 43 with the Caps, plus added north of a point per game at 8 points in their 7-game series, their first round loss to the Florida Panthers. So Orlov, that sound you hear is him cashing in what is a thin crop, with the next guy available on the defense market is Ryan Graves. And then you have to go all the way down to number 17 or 18 with Scott Mayfield, and beginning that next tier of defensemen, including guys like Matt Dumba and John Klingberg. So it's not a great year to be on the market for defensemen. And as much as the Bruins would have liked to have kept him, they're already in the process of trying to unload some other contracts elsewhere. And Orlov just isn't going to be able to fit.
Yeah, when demand outweighs supply, Frank, that drives prices up. Hey, economics.
That's that St. Lawrence education right there.
That's it, man. I could do yield curves, demand curves all day. Well, 20 years ago at least. So, all right, we just watched the Stanley Cup Finals. There's definitely teams that are players that have upped their value. We talked about Aiden Hill. I think he'll be north of $4 million for sure. But who else do you think has upped their own contract level on this next one that they'll sign in the offseason?
Yeah, just coming out of the Vegas Golden Knights, it would be Ivan Barbashev. He had a fantastic playoff run for the Golden Knights. You look here, 22 games played, 18 points. A guy that really had a scoring touch in St. Louis, now a 2-time Stanley Cup champion, was a big part of that team's run back in 2019. And when you look at Barbashev, a couple years ago, 26 goals, 60 points. The start of this year was incredibly slow for him in St. Louis, and people weren't really sure what to make of him. I think he's now taken off in a big way offensively, and that run proved that he's got some elements to his game that make him a really attractive player. So Barbashev has jetted up into the top 10 on our free agents list. He checks in at number 9, and I think a really, depending on price, of course, Mike, a sneaky good addition to a team that I think he's one of those guys that helps you win.
Yeah, I agree. And I tell you what, though, regular season Barbashev is different than playoff Barbashev. And you really saw this year. You saw it with St. Louis when they won their cup in 2019 as well. But brings a physical element, and he's got good hands around the net. So let's flip this over to a surefire Hall of Famer that we got some question marks about. Patrick Kane, he just recently underwent hip surgery. He might miss 4 to 6 months. Do you think he's going to sign somewhere right away on July 1st, or is this a longer play?
I would think it's a longer play. Just in talking to some teams around the league, Mike, they were really surprised at the surgery path that Kane went down. The hip resurfacing surgery, I mean, you heard Caps GM Brian McClellan talk about it with Nicholas Backstrom. He can't move. He can't play. And he was basically like, this guy needs to either figure it out or end his career, essentially, because he's not up to NHL snuff. And when you hear of Patrick Kane's camp talk about getting this in-depth surgery so that he can then bounce back and rejuvenate his career, a lot of teams see it as a big question mark. They think that this might be one of those career enders. Instead of trying to fix something, it may have caused more trouble. That surgery is significant. You're actually like quite literally wearing down the hip bone, like grinding it down and the joint. It's an ugly, labor intensive rehab. And I'm sure Kane's up to the task. No one's ever questioned his desire and competitive fire and love of the game. It's just that he was kind of a shell of himself in that first round series for the New York Rangers. Clearly, the hip is an issue. And my thought process is if there's one team that's going to go out on an absolute limb and sign Patrick Kane sight unseen essentially this summer, it would probably be the Buffalo Sabres, the hometown team. Maybe you throw a couple $1,000,000 at him when you have tons of salary cap space, clearly for a team going in the right direction. Other than that, I think it's going to come down to Patrick Kane looking in November and December and saying, these are the teams that are off to a great start. I'd like to go chase a Stanley Cup there. And I think the teams are going to want to see Patrick Kane skating and get a view of that before committing what little cap space they have left to him. Regardless, if he waits until November or December to make a decision, almost all of that cap space is going to be spent. Teams generally spend 96 to 97% of all total available dollars. And that probably means that Kane's looking at a short-term, short money deal to work his way back into the NHL. But as mentioned, Mike, it's a long road ahead.
Yeah, bottom line, nobody's had hip or surfacing surgery and come back and been the same. Kessler didn't even play. Jovanovski, not the same. Backstrom, same way. Huge question marks. I'd want to see it too. So real quick to wrap this a little bit down the road, we got the unusual Group 6 free agents out there. I got my eye on Joey Daccord, goaltender in the Seattle Kraken franchise, but you've got somebody else that may have some teams interested.
By the way, side note, you mentioned the Kraken. They're also looking to move Chris Driedger. Probably not a surprise. Also coming off of significant injury. But on the Group 6 free agent front, we already saw Mikey Eyssimont re-sign with the Tampa Bay Lightning, a 2-year deal. He was a pending Group 6 free agent. And Matthew Phillips of the Calgary Flames is another one who has, I believe, generated some interest on the market. Look, you take a look at his AHL numbers, 36 goals, 76 points, back-to-back years inside the top 10 in AHL scoring, someone who hasn't gotten a crack at the NHL level under Daryl Sutter, and really wants and is ready for an opportunity. The Flames want to keep him. Craig Conroy and Ryan Huska have a youth movement afoot, and they're trying right now to convince Phillips to stay, but because he hasn't gotten that shot and he's 25 years old, he is in line to become a total UFA on July 1st. It's the undersized 5'7" frame that's held him back to this point, at least in terms of a lot of teams believing he can be an impact NHL guy. But we've already seen small, undersized guys come through the Calgary Flames organization, go elsewhere, and block Marty St. Louis. That would be one. So if I were Matthew Phillips, I'd say it's hard now, given your run in the organization, to convince me, even with new guys, that I'm going to get an authentic shot. I'd like to see someone somewhere else step up and put some money on the line in a one-way guaranteed deal to take a chance on me, knowing that I'm going to get a real authentic opportunity. Take Craig Conroy at his word. But to me, when I look at Matthew Phillips, I'm like, why not? Why wouldn't you give that guy a chance? Clearly a talented guy.
Has the well been poisoned? Fascinating stuff, Frank, as usual. Great job on this week's Icebreakers. That'll wrap it for this segment.